The Philadelphia 76ers have had a roller coaster of the last few years, with so much drama and ridiculous things happening within that franchise in that span. Early on, because of the promise of both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons showed in their early careers, they were viewed as one of the most promising teams in the NBA for the future, but since then there's been so many ups and downs. People have questioned the fit, several different general managers have come and gone, which has included drama of its own, and the team seemingly botched one of the best opportunities any team in the league had last year. So coming into this current season, it was a defining moment for many within the organization. Changes were made to the coaching staff, and Daryl Morey was brought in to run basketball operations, and with that, even more changes came to the roster around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And now, here we are with them sitting atop the league in the standings in the early going. For today's video, we'll be discussing how and why this team might have finally cracked the code to unlocking the full potential of their best players, why this team is different from years past, and whether or not this early success they are experiencing is sustainable. Before we get started though, it turns out about 68% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now, with that being said, let's begin. So, last season was admittedly a bit of a disaster for the Sixers as a whole, and there was a good chance that all of their progress would have been set back for years if they didn't make the extreme changes that they made in the offseason. The team as it had been previously built just didn't work, and the spacing was horrendous around their two stud players that can only play to their strengths when the floor is spaced. Al Horford's presence provided nothing but negatives regarding this issue. Josh Richardson's playstyle as a wing defender and slasher was somewhat repetitive and not what the team was in need of, especially considering the fact that he's only a mediocre shooter at best from the perimeter, making for yet another player defenses could confidently sag off of in order to double-team Joel Embiid, and the bench didn't have any capable playmakers besides Shake Milton, who really only started to bud into a productive player late in last year when it was too late. The fact that Daryl Morey successfully swapped Al Horford for Danny Green and Josh Richardson for Seth Curry was obviously lauded at the time the moves were made, but in the early going, these two genuinely look like they fit perfectly. Starting with Seth Curry and what he brings to the team, throughout his career, he's found himself overshadowed by his brother Steph, who just so happens to be the greatest shooter in the history of the league. But what most never seem to realize is that Seth, to this point in his career, has been the second most efficient three-point shooter in NBA history, making about 45% of his threes over the course of his career. He may not shoot them in as high a volume as Steph does, but he himself has been one of the most reliable floor spacers in the league ever since he's begun to get consistent minutes in rotations. Plus, he's always been in situations where he's been playing alongside volume scorers such as Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard, and CJ McCollum, so his role hasn't ever been as important because of the repetitiveness. But in Philly, his skill set was desperately needed, so the fact that he's having a career year so far in the early going shouldn't surprise anyone. This season, Seth is posting career highs in points, field goal percentage, three-point percentage, and most impressive of all, assists per game. Now, looking deeper into these numbers and then correlating it to what we see on the court, teams have always loved to double-team Joel Embiid from the very beginning of his career, because year in and year out, he's been one of, if not the best post players in the whole NBA. But with that being said, he's also sometimes struggled with turnovers when dealing with these double teams. With Seth Curry, teams have been far more hesitant to double-team him, and Embiid has dealt far better with the times that he's been double-teamed because he himself has said in interviews that he's found more confidence than ever in the shooters around him being able to make teams pay for leaving them open. Seth Curry is knocking down a ridiculous 65% of his catch-and-shoot threes this season, and if you want to know why that is, it's not only because he's a terrific shooter, but it's also because of the fact that 75% of those looks so far this season have been classified as either open or wide open, meaning meaning that he's had a minimum of 4 feet of space between him and any defender on 3 out of every 4 catch-and-shoot threes that he's taken this year, which is easy money for a shooter of his caliber. Once teams begin to realize that they can't sag off of shooters anymore later into the season, this is only going to make Embiid's life easier, and after leading the entire NBA last year in both post-ups per game and post-up efficiency, we very well could see him improve even further upon those numbers, which is pretty crazy to think about. Now let's shift our focus to another aspect of the Sixers team this year that has unlocked themselves as a whole, being their ball movement introduced to their system by head coach Doc Rivers. Admittedly, the team did pass the ball a lot in the past under coach Brett Brown, but from watching them play, a lot of the passes were made just for the sake of passing it, without having any real purpose involved. This year, the 76ers lead the entire NBA in passes per game, and when you watch them play, you see every pass made is done in order to create space, to create an opening for someone else around them. A lot of this, as I mentioned before, can be attributed to Joel Embiid showing a ton of improvement and confidence passing out of double teams from the post, which then results in beautiful swinging of the ball around the perimeter until they find an open shooter. But in general, the entire team is playing selflessly, looking for the best look at a shot regardless of who gets it. We saw this a lot from the Los Angeles Lakers last season because that team's camaraderie and chemistry was off the charts, and it resulted in a championship for them, and the Sixers clearly took notes on that by bringing in 2 Lakers from that team in Danny Green and Dwight Howard, who both not only shore up the defensive side of things, but are also 2 incredible veterans to have in a locker room that provide great assistance to things like chemistry and leadership, with their championship pedigree. And now, speaking of defense, this leads me to the calling card of this team, and arguably the biggest reason they've been so good early on, being the fact that the Sixers are comfortably the #1 ranked defense in the NBA right now. I cannot speak highly enough about both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons' defensive production to start this year, as they have both been genuinely monsters on that end. Joel Embiid has been criticized for his ability to stay in shape in recent past, but he has been a runner-up for the Defensive Player of the Year award back in 2018, and now he looks to be back in peak game shape, playing at that level once again, protecting the rim, and making life hell for anyone around the basket. On top of that, Ben Simmons took the leap into elite status of defenders last year, having made first-team All-Defense, and this year, he's picked right back up where he left off, and seems to be gunning for the Defensive Player of the Year award as well. The Sixers as a team are only allowing 99.4 points per 100 possessions, beating out the second best defense by over 3 points. On top of that, with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris on the court together, the Sixers outscore opponents by 24 points per 100 possessions, making the team's core of players into one of the most dominant trios to start the season. This brings me to the final talking point I'll be making today, being about the man currently winning back many of the fans, Tobias Harris. Harris, rightfully so, received a lot of criticism about how much he struggled last season while being paid a full max contract, but this year he looks like a brand new player. He's coming off a week where he won the NBA's Player of the Week award, he's been uber efficient, knocking down 52% of his shots and 47% of his threes, and I don't know what Doc Rivers does, but he's always worked his magic with Tobias, and he's doing it again. Rivers actually got the most out of Tobias back when he was playing with the Clippers a few seasons ago, as Tobias nearly made the All-Star team that season, and now he's putting Tobias into situations that have resulted in him playing better than ever. Some of the things he struggled with the most that don't show up in the box score include how he used to consistently hesitate to shoot on pull-up threes, looking more often to pump fake and then drive into traffic. But now, if he has an open look, he's been much more confident in his shot, and it's resulted in a spike in his efficiency. Obviously, there are many more factors that have gone into the start that his team has seen this season, such as Shake Milton developing into a reliable playmaker off the bench, Dwight Howard shoring up the defense in the second unit, and rookie Tyrese Maxey putting pressure on defenses off the dribble, but overall, it's been very promising. It's still very early on, and they have yet to be tested by many of the league's best teams, so whether or not this level of dominance will continue is obviously yet to be seen, but at the very least, this year's version of the Sixers simply just works much better than last year's did, and they have as good of a shot as anyone in the East this year. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the Sixers to start this season. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.